You know, when you sit down to watch a highly anticipated sporting event, there's this sort of emotional contract you sign.
Right, yeah, you're expecting a show.
Exactly. You're signing up for a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You want the agonizingly slow climbs, the sudden drops, those moments where you're just, hanging upside down, wondering how the momentum is going to shift next. That's the whole thrill.
Oh, for sure. Unpredictability is basically the core product. It's why we spend hours watching people hit a ball with a piece of wood instead of just, running a computer simulation to see who wins.
Yeah. But then every once in a while, what you get isn't a roller coaster at all. Sometimes you buy your ticket, you take your seat, and you suddenly realize you've been strapped to the front of a bullet train.
That is a great way to put it. Just a straight line.
A total marvel of just ruthless engineering.
Yeah.
It moves in exactly one direction, and it absolutely obliterates everything in its path. And, while it lacks that suspense, the sheer unbroken physics of it is awe-inspiring in a totally different way. So welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Today is March 28, 2026, and we are unpacking the highly anticipated IPL opener between Sunrisers Hyderabad and Royal Challengers Bengaluru right at the M. Chinnaswamy Stadium. And to do that, we've got an absolutely phenomenal stack of analytical journalism from the Critechery newsletter.
Which is so crucial today because looking at the standard highlight reel of this match really does not tell the true story, at all.
No, it really doesn't.
The Critechery data models, they give us this totally different lens. We're talking about proprietary metrics like the burn rate, the Humdinger Score, and these live win probability curves.
Yeah.
They basically take the emotional narrative of the game and translate it into a mathematical architecture.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today for you, the listener, is to really look past the final scoreline. Because on paper, you just see that RCB won by 6 wickets with a massive 26 balls remaining.
A complete blowout.
Right, a total blowout. But we want to uncover the hidden underlying mechanics of what was essentially a wire-to-wire T20 domination. How does a team construct a victory so efficiently that the opposition basically just ceases to exist?
Well, what's fascinating here is a very specific metric from our source material. It's called the Critechery Volatility Index.
Okay, the volatility index.
Yeah. Think of it like a seismograph for momentum. It measures how violently a match seesaws between the two dugouts. So a high score means constant lead changes, lots of drama.
Right.
This particular match scored a 1.00.
Wow. A 1.0.
Literally a flat line. It means RCB seized mathematical control of the game from the very first ball of the second over, and the momentum literally never swung back toward Hyderabad, not even a single blip.
Just a perfectly straight horizontal line on the graph. That is almost impossible in the modern T20 format.
It's incredibly rare, yeah.
But to understand how RCB pulled off that kind of, sterile domination, we actually have to rewind a bit. We need to look at the target they were chasing. So Sunrisers Hyderabad batted first and put up 201 for 9.
Which is a big number.
Yeah, if you're just glancing at the scoreboard, 201 looks like a mountain. But the data insists we look at the structural integrity of that mountain. And that brings us to our first real analytical tool from the stack. The burn rate.
Right, the burn rate. This is essentially a visual ledger of a team's resources. So in a 20-over match, you have 120 balls to face, and you have 10 wickets.
Meaning 10 batters you can afford to lose.
Exactly. The burn rate basically plots those overs elapsed on one axis against the wickets remaining on the other. It shows us if a team is, trading their batters for runs at a rational, sustainable pace, or if they are just totally hemorrhaging their resources.
I was actually trying to visualize this while I was reading the report, and the best way I can describe it is it's like managing your budget for a cross-country road trip.
Okay, I like that.
You've got a finite tank of gas and 1,000 miles to go. So a healthy burn rate means you're pacing your mileage. Maybe you accelerate a bit to pass a truck, but generally, you're keeping the engine humming.
Right, you're being efficient.
But what SRH did was, burn through 3/4 of their gas tank on Monday morning, coast on fumes for 3 days, and then try to floor the pedal on Friday when the engine was completely starved.
That is a remarkably accurate assessment of their innings progression, actually.
Well, thanks. But I do want to push back on one conclusion the data draws here, because I was looking at the phase report for the SRH innings. The analysts flagged Hyderabad's final few overs, the death phase, as a, quote, reckless period of play. But if you look at the raw run accumulation, they were scoring at 11 runs and over during that stretch. If you're putting up 11 and over at the very end of an innings, how does the algorithm justify penalizing them with the reckless label? Why not just call it an attacking success?
That's a great question. It's because the algorithm calculates the cost of those runs, not just the volume.
Okay, the cost.
Right. Yes, they were scoring at 11 runs and over, but the data shows they lost 6 wickets for just 46 runs in those final 5 overs.
Oh, wow. 6 wickets.
Yeah, it's a catastrophic wicket burn. When you look at the burn rate graph, the line doesn't just dip, it literally falls off a cliff.
What?
The lower order batters essentially committed statistical harakiri.
Just totally reckless swinging.
Exactly. They swung wildly, hit a few boundaries, sure, but then immediately got out. And by burning through their remaining batters so aggressively, they forced their absolute worst hitters, the tail-enders, to take the crease, starting in over 17.5.
Yikes.
They just ran out of competent personnel to properly optimize the 20th over.
Ah, I see. So returning to that road trip analogy, they had the open highway right in front of them, but they had literally no vehicle left to drive. The wheels had completely come off.
Precisely. They definitely left runs out there. But, the reason they were forced into that panicked, hyper-aggressive state at the end goes all the way back to the Monday morning of your analogy.
Right, the early collapse.
The power play wreckage. After just 6 overs, SRH was reeling at 49 for 3.
Which is just a massive structural failure right out of the gate. And what the Critechery deep dive highlights is that a huge part of that early wreckage came down to one very specific batter-bowler matchup.
This is the best part.
Right. You had RCB's Jacob Duffy taking the ball against SRH's Travis Head. Now, if you follow the sport, you know Travis Head has been arguably the most destructive power play batter alive recently. The guy strikes at over 186.
He is terrifying to bowl to.
He's terrifying, yet Duffy completely dismantled him in just 3 deliveries. How did he actually execute that?
It was an absolute masterclass in geometric bowling. Duffy utilized an angle and hold technique.
Yeah.
So he is a right-arm fast bowler, and he chose to bowl over the wicket to the left-handed Travis Head.
Okay.
This naturally creates a diagonal trajectory. The ball angles sharply across the pitch, directly into Head's body.
Right, so as a batter, your brain instinctively calculates that angle, and you expect the ball to just keep moving down the leg side following that line.
Exactly. Head's eyes tell him to play for that inward angle. But at the final microsecond of his release, Duffy keeps his wrist completely locked and the seam perfectly upright.
Oh, wow.
So when the ball hits the pitch, it actually defies the diagonal momentum. Instead of continuing into the batter, it quote-unquote holds its line and just goes straight on.
That is brilliant.
It perfectly exploited Head's historical weakness against right arm angle. Head planted his back foot, played slightly across the line expecting the ball to follow him, and instead the ball just kissed the outside edge of his bat, gone for under 5 runs.
I mean, it's essentially an optical illusion delivered at 140 kilometers an hour. Just incredible. So SRH is basically bleeding out in the power play, but they do manage some frantic repair work in the middle overs. Heinrich Klaassen and Ishan Kishan managed to put together an 84-run partnership.
Right, a severely load-bearing partnership. I mean, They dragged the team from a disastrous 29 for 3 up to 113 for 3 by the 12th over. Without that stabilization, SRH wouldn't have even sniffed 150, let alone 201.
But reading the breakdown of that partnership, what really stood out to me wasn't the runs they scored, but the runs they didn't score.
Yes, the containment.
Exactly. Klaassen is historically a monster against spin bowling. He usually just devours it. Yet RCB deployed Suyash Sharma, a leg spinner, and somehow Sharma kept Klaassen's strike rate bogged down at 142. For a player of Klaassen's caliber in the middle overs, a 142 strike rate is practically standing still. How did Sharma handcuff him like that?
By relentlessly bowling what coaches call the wrong length. It sounds totally counterintuitive, but it's a brilliant containment strategy.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. To hit a spinner for a boundary, a batter generally needs one of 2 things. Either the ball needs to be pitched incredibly short so they have time to rock back and cut it, or it needs to be pitched right up at their toes so they can get under it and loft it for a drive.
So Sharma simply refused to give him either of those options.
Exactly. He lived in the dead zone. He bowled just full enough to completely remove the cut shot, but just short enough that Klaassen couldn't get his bat under the ball for a lofted drive.
So he just physically trapped Klaassen in his crease?
Yeah, forcing him to just hit ground balls for singles. It frustrated Klaassen until he eventually forced a shot that wasn't there and fell for 37 off 26 balls. Sharma executed a flawless tactical blueprint.
Okay, so SRH scrambles. They claw their way to 201 for 9, masking a ton of underlying structural chaos with a few flashy boundary numbers at the very end. Which leaves us looking at this 201 target, a target that because of that reckless finish, might have actually been 15 or 20 runs short of what they really should have posted.
Yep, they left a lot on the table.
And you see the weight of that instantly when we transition to RCB's chase.
A chase defined by absolute mathematical efficiency.
But wait, it did not start efficiently. Here's where it gets really interesting, because I found myself staring at the data, utterly confused at first.
The first ball.
Yes. On the very first ball of the innings, RCB's Phil Salt is dismissed, pound to Bubu, leg before wicket. 0 runs. Now, normally, an LBW on ball 1 is a devastating psychological blow, right? The batter completely misjudges the line, the umpire's finger goes up, the crowd goes absolutely feral, it sends a shockwave through the dugout.
Usually, yes, it's panic mode.
Yet, when I looked at the win probability model in the newsletter, the algorithm basically shrugged. It barely registered the wicket. I had to dig into the submetrics to figure out why, and I realized it's all about replacement value, right?
You hit the nail on the head. The model shrugged because Salt's wicket was instantaneously mathematically erased by the man who walked out on ball 2, Virat Kohli.
Right. The algorithm knows that losing Salt means losing his projected runs, but it also knows that bringing Kohli to the crease to face a brand new hard cricket ball during the power play field restrictions is incredibly lucrative.
Precisely. The model calculated that Kohli facing 59 balls is actually more valuable than Salt facing 60.
That is wild.
The human element sees a first ball duck as a disaster. The data sees it as an aggressive portfolio reallocation. By the end of the first over, despite losing a wicket on ball 1, RCB's win probability was already sitting at 64.6%.
Unbelievable. But the true turning point, what the analysts call the inflection point of the match, that didn't happen until over 7. And it wasn't triggered by a mistake from the fielding side. It was just pure, unadulterated dominance.
Over 7, ball 2 to be incredibly precise. This is the exact moment the algorithmic forecast shifted from RCB will probably win to RCB has definitively won.
Wow, what happened on ball 2?
Kohli hits a massive 6 to bring up his half-century off just 29 balls. That single over-yielded 19 runs.
And the data shows the win probability violently spiking from 78.3% to 91.6% in the span of those 6 deliveries. That is a 0.133 gradient on the graph.
It's a massive jump.
For those of us who aren't data scientists, what does a 0.133 gradient actually mean in the context of a cricket match?
It means the slope of the probability line went nearly vertical. In statistical modeling terms, a single batter generating a V1-133 spike in 1 over has the exact same mathematical impact on the game as the bowling team taking 2 back-to-back wickets.
2 wickets from one guy just hitting the ball.
Exactly. Kohli hitting his stride in that over essentially slammed the window shut on SRH. It never opened again.
The final numbers for Kohli are staggering. He finishes 82 not out off 46 balls, a strike rate of 178.3. But we do have to acknowledge he didn't build this bullet train totally by himself. He and Rajat Patidar constructed a 154-run partnership spanning about 11 overs.
It was relentless.
They maintained a run rate of 14 during that stand. Compare that to SRH, whose biggest partnership was 84 runs built on sheer panic. Kohli and Patidar built an empire.
They systematically dismantled the SRH bowling attack, and what's really remarkable is how effortless it looked.
Yes. The Critechery piece pulled some commentary gems from the broadcast that perfectly capture the psychological devastation of this chase. There's a moment where Kohli hits a 6 off Harshal Patel, and the announcer literally describes it over the airwaves as, quote, easy as breathing.
A very poetic way to describe a biometric reality, really. Kohli wasn't straining. I mean, his heart rate probably barely spiked. He was simply operating at a frequency of timing and placement that the opposition couldn't even tune into.
And then just an over later, he plays a sweep shot, and the commentator says, Kohli doesn't even need to aim. Think about how demoralizing that is.
Oh, it's crushing.
When the guy in the broadcast booth is pointing out to millions of people that the batter doesn't even need to look at where he's hitting the ball, your bowling attack is having a full-blown existential crisis.
And that crisis reached its absolute terminal point in Harshal Patel's nightmare, 15th over. RCB only needed 18 runs to finish the game at that point.
Right.
Harshal bowls 4 consecutive deliveries to Kohli. The sequence of those 4 balls, 6, 4, 4, 4, match over at 15.4 overs.
Just absolutely clinical. But I want to talk about why Harshal Patel failed so spectacularly in that specific over, because historically, Harshal is a genius with slower ball variations. At the Chinnaswamy Stadium under the lights, the pitch usually gets a little tacky, the ball grips the surface, and those slower balls are lethal. Why didn't they work here?
Because Kohli had already downloaded Harshall's physics engine.
He already had his number.
Exactly. Harshall tried those exact same slower variations back in the 11th over. Kohli watched them, calculated the subtle changes in revolution and dip, calibrated his own bat swing, and simply waited. By the time the 15th over rolled around, Kohli wasn't guessing. He was expecting them. He just dismissed them with absolute disdain.
Okay, so we've looked at the execution on the grass, we've seen the burn rate and the inflection point, but I want to pull back the curtain and look at the boardroom level strategy for a moment, because this match was also decisively shaped by how the two captains deployed their impact player cards.
Ah, yes, the tactics.
Think of the impact player rule like holding a wild card in your hand. You can swap out one player for another at any point, completely changing the dynamics of your 11. But timing that swap is everything, isn't it?
Timing is the only metric that matters with the impact card. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really a test of a captain's real-time situational awareness.
Exactly. And we saw two wildly different approaches here. RCB swapped out their fast bowler, Jacob Duffy, for a specialist batter, Devdutt Padikkal, at exactly over 7. SRH, on the other hand, waited until over 17.5 to swap out Travis Head for the bowler, David Payne.
Right.
Now, I was trying to think of a good way to describe SRH's decision. It's not just buying fire insurance for a burnt house. It's more like hiring a designated driver after you've already wrapped your car around a telephone pole.
That is a perfect, if slightly grim, analogy. And if you look at the win probabilities at the exact moments those two cards were played, it exposes a massive gulf in tactical intelligence between the two dugouts.
So break down RCB's move first. Why over 7?
Well, RCB played their card from a position of overwhelming strength. At the end of the 6th over, their win probability was sitting at a very comfortable 78.3%. Jacob Duffy had bowled brilliantly, taking 3 for 24, but he had finished his maximum 4-over quota.
He couldn't bowl anymore.
Exactly. In the ecosystem of a cricket match, a bowler who has finished their overs is essentially a ghost on the field. They can't contribute anything else. So RCB immediately swaps his ghost out and brings in a fresh, live asset Padikkal at the exact optimal window to keep the strike rotating. They essentially played the rest of the match with 12 active contributors.
A total masterstroke of resource optimization. And then you have SRH.
SRH made what the data models call a ceremonial move. They deployed their wild card when their win probability was hovering at roughly 4%.
4%. I mean, in predictive modeling, that is basically the margin of error for a miracle.
It is a total dead zone. Now, SRH needed a death bowler, and David Payne is undeniably excellent in that role. But they brought him onto the field when RCB needed just 18 runs off 18 balls with 9 wickets in hand.
It's too late.
Statistically, the decision was completely meaningless. The game had already flatlined. If they were going to deploy Payne, the math dictates they needed to do it back in over 13 or 14, when the game was at least theoretically still breathing. Bringing him in at 17.5 was purely cosmetic. It was an illusion of strategy.
So if you're a fan sitting in the stands, what does this all mean? We know the math of how RCB won. We know the boardroom strategy behind the wild cards. But what did it actually feel like to watch this bullet train in motion? And that brings us to my absolute favorite metric from the Critechery stack, the Humdinger Score.
Oh, the Humdinger Score. It's the ultimate reality check for sports broadcasting. We love to hype every single game as a classic, but the Humdinger Score strips away the marketing and measures the actual biological tension of a match on a scale of 1 to 10.
And this match scored a dismal 2.9 out of 10. So I have to play devil's advocate for you here, keeping the listener in mind. If you tuned in to watch a highly anticipated season opener, and the match scores a 2.9 on the excitement scale, did T20 cricket fail you today? Or is there a beauty in witnessing a sterile, clinical execution?
It really depends on what you value. The Humdinger Score isn't a judgment on the quality of the athletic performance. It's strictly a measurement of the anxiety produced.
Right.
The objective reality is that this was not a thriller. But a lack of tension doesn't mean a lack of spectacle. Watching a master craftsman work without making a single mistake is a spectacle in its own right.
I was looking at the formula for the Humdinger Score, and I noticed it heavily penalizes matches that don't go the distance. You get 0 points for last over drama because, well, the match ended in the 15th over.
Exactly.
And you get 0 points for the margin of victory because RCB won by a massive 6 wickets.
Correct. No nail-biting finishes, no final ball heroics. But the real anchor dragging that score down to a 2.9 is the win probability proximity.
Okay, explain that one, because I think that's the most fascinating part of the algorithm.
Win probability proximity measures how much of the match lived in the 40 to 60% tension zone.
The sweet spot.
Right. Psychologically, that 40 to 60% range is where human anxiety lives. It's the coin flip zone.
Yeah.
If a team has an 80% chance to win, the viewer is mostly just waiting for the inevitable. But when it's 50-50, every single delivery carries the suffocating weight of the entire match.
Oh, absolutely.
In this game, only 4.5% of the total deliveries fell into that tension zone, and almost all of them were in the first over. For 95% of the run chase, the outcome was mathematically obvious.
Okay, so if it failed all those tension metrics, where did the 2.9 actually come from? Because it's not a 0. It earned points somewhere.
It earned full bonus points in two very specific subcategories, the wicket cluster and the boundary burst.
Okay, what are those?
The wicket cluster points came entirely from SRH's chaotic power play collapse, losing 3 wickets in the first 3 overs. That generates a very specific sharp spike of high drama. And the boundary burst points came from Virat Kohli's closing onslaught, where he was hitting boundaries on over 40% of his deliveries in the death phase.
So to summarize the viewer experience for you guys, it was a commanding victory. It was an absolute masterclass for data analysts and strategists, but maybe a bit of a snooze fest for neutral thrill seekers who just wanted a heart attack in the 20th over.
Precisely. If you wanted a roller coaster, you left the stadium disappointed. If you appreciate the ruthless engineering of a bullet train, you were mesmerized.
I love that framing. And, looking at all this data, whether you're managing a major project at work or just trying to budget your time and energy for the week, there's a real tangible lesson in the burn rate metric we discussed today.
Definitely a real-world application there.
You have to ask yourself, are you blindly burning all your resources on Monday morning like SRH, leaving yourself completely empty for the finish line? Or are you operating with the clinical, unbroken efficiency of Virat Kohli's RCB chase, pacing your resources so perfectly that reaching your end goal feels entirely inevitable?
That is the practical takeaway. But, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought from the source material, a counterfactual.
Oh, I love these.
The Critechery newsletter calls these run, Lola, run moments. They are the tiny, seemingly insignificant variables that could have branched reality into a completely different timeline.
The butterfly effect. Give it to us.
So we spent this whole time talking about how the volatility index was a perfect 1.00, how the algorithm insisted RCB's win was a mathematical certainty from the second over. But the data almost ignores a massive glaring human error.
Wait, what error?
In over 14, ball 4, SRH's fielder, Nitish Reddy, actually dropped Virat Kohli at deep mid-wicket.
Wait, I remember that. Kohli was on 68 at the time, wasn't he?
He was. The ball came flat and hard, it slipped right through Reddy's hands, and it actually deflected over the boundary rope for 6 runs. And here's what I want you to ponder. What if Reddy's palms were just a little less sweaty? What if he had held on to that catch?
I mean, if he catches it, RCB still needed 18 runs from 12 balls. That's still highly achievable.
On paper, yes. But consider the context. At the other end of the pitch, Tim David was at the crease. And Tim David was surviving by hitting these wildly unorthodox tennis forehand boundaries.
Right, where he abandons the classical cricket technique entirely. He grips the bat like a racket and just horizontal slaps the ball purely on hand-eye coordination.
Exactly. It's not classical geometry, it's brute force chaos. If Kohli gets out on that drop catch, you suddenly have Tim David's chaos on one end and a brand new batter walking out to the middle, trying to find their timing under stadium lights, with the required run rate suddenly creeping up.
Oh, wow. The pressure entirely shifts.
Right. Could a single drop catch have completely derailed a match that the algorithms insisted was a 1.00 volatility index certainty?
It really makes you wonder, does data ever truly account for human hands, sweaty palms, and the suffocating pressure of 40,000 screaming fans?
It's the eternal ghost in the machine. The math says RCB was always going to win. The dropped catch whispers, well, maybe not.
And that is exactly why we watch the games rather than just reading the spreadsheets the next morning. Sometimes you get the perfectly engineered bullet train, but there is always the lingering threat of a derailed track. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you go about your week, remember to look past the final score in your own life, question the hidden numbers behind the narratives, and please manage your burn rate. Catch you next time.